We're looking at the National Weather Service all hazards map here, valid as of Wednesday morning. And unfortunately, there's a lot of pink on this map. That pink color, there are excessive heat warnings out for a number of counties across the West. And we've seen this behavior or activity over the last maybe 7+ days. It has been a very long and persistent heat wave that we've been dealing with in the West Coast. Just recently became historic in many locations in Southern California. Daily record highs being reached right in California, included in that Las Vegas, Nevada just 2 days ago, reaching their all-time record high temperature of 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Just extreme heat that we've seen over the last week or so. Obviously, continuing today with these excessive heat warnings posted for much of Nevada, California, say for some of the coastal areas, Arizona, all the way up into parts of the Northwest, eastern Washington, northern Oregon, parts of the Snake River Valley. That orange color you can see there, those are heat advisories, so still warm days for areas there as well, and just not quite as excessive. And the reason for all this is this just persistent upper level ridge we've seen parked across the western region here. I'll try to draw that, make it a little bit more visible for you all. And what we can see here is the jet stream flowing up and over the western U.S. You can see that clockwise flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And it's underneath that ridge where we expect the warmest temperatures. So we can kind of draw out this area here. Typically, we find in summer our warmest temperatures located about there. And if I jump back and show you that all hazards map, right, overlapping the area underneath that clockwise flow in the atmosphere. So unfortunately, these things, kind of playing their hand here and showing us what they can do in summer. And again, right in the middle of July, kind of climatologically is when we're very hot anyway in the western U.S. So you get one of these anomalous upper level ridges, and it's just bringing in some historic heat here. Now, fortunately, and this is different from where we were last week, but if we look out into the forecast this week, at least here on Wednesday, July 10th, we can finally see at least hints of how this heat might break down, or at least moderate a little bit if we look out into the future. That wasn't really the case last week, where, the further we looked out in the forecast, we just saw that persistent ridging over the western U.S., and that was an inkling, even then, that this was going to be a long duration type of heat wave, and we've certainly seen that, unfortunately, over the last kind of 5 to 7 days. So here's the forecast here today. This is from the ECMWF. I'll take it out and make it valid around lunchtime here today. And what we're looking at here are the upper level ridges and the troughs in the atmosphere. And we can see in this kind of warmer or red color here, the anomalous upper level ridge kind of parked across the western region. This is kind of just what we were looking at before looking at the jet stream map. So a very similar kind of presentation here. This just looking at 500 millibar height anomalies, a little bit different of a product. Now, I'm going to take this forecast into Thursday, tomorrow, and we don't see a huge change in that ridge positioning, kind of parked right over Nevada, parts of California, and Arizona, again, prompting those excessive heat warnings that are continued here through today and tomorrow. But as we go to the day Friday and Saturday, you'll see a little bit of weakness here off the west coast of both Oregon, California, even north of Hawaii here. Just these little kind of cut-off upper level lows coming out of the Pacific. That should help to bring temperatures down ever so slightly. And taking temperatures down from maybe 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the valley down toward maybe 104, 105 degrees Fahrenheit is going to provide a little bit of relief. And even just kind of looking at the colors here, don't see quite as anomalously strong of an upper level ridge now through the weekend. It's certainly still there, but it's moved east a bit. Now maybe centered over Salt Lake City, or western Colorado, or southwestern Wyoming, even parts of northeast Arizona. So that ridge is still there. It's still parked across the west. We're still going to be dealing with these warmer temperatures, but perhaps shifting a bit east and allowing some of the weakness here, these little upper level troughs trying to push into the west coast to bring temperatures down, starting around this weekend, maybe into early next week, for places immediately along the west coast, including the valleys there in the Central Valley and the Willamette Valley. I'll take this forecast into Monday and Tuesday of next week, and now that ridge is really breaking down across the western U.S., and this kind of breakdown of this anomalous ridge is going to allow more seasonal temperatures to move into parts of California, Oregon, Arizona. Now, I say seasonally appropriate temperatures, right, for July 16th. It's still going to be warm, but not quite as excessively hot with the the pink and pretty colors that we saw in the all hazards map just a few slides ago. Now, that heat and that ridge, you can kind of see there, is pushing further toward the north here, up into Canada, parts of Alberta and British Columbia, where that anomalous ridge is really kind of getting situated here early next week. So likely going to see that heat and the anomalous heat push north, and see that even out to Wednesday and then later into next week, where we have this much more amplified ridge here across parts of the northwest of North America, really into Canada, perhaps parts of the Pacific Northwest as well, likely seeing warmer temperatures up here in the northern U.S. Rockies. So that's an area where we're going to watch the heat shift kind of over the next 7 days. If we get daytime high temperatures forecasted from the NDFD, that's the National Digital Forecast Database from the National Weather Service. High temps here today on Wednesday looking at 105 degrees plus in the valley, the Central Valley of California. Very warm temperatures, hot temperatures in the lower Colorado River Valley. We're talking 115 degrees Fahrenheit plus for places like Las Vegas, and then further down the river and areas toward Yuma, Arizona. Very warm temperatures in eastern Washington. We saw the excessive heat warnings posted there, and for the middle Snake River Valley, with temperatures approaching 110 degrees Fahrenheit in some of the municipalities there, also northern Oregon included in that. Take this out Thursday, even see maybe slightly warmer temperatures on Thursday and Friday, again as that ridge is still parked across the west region, but cooling down a little bit in eastern Washington and perhaps even parts of the lower Colorado River Valley. Saturday, you can see a slight, ever so slight cooling in the Central Valley, not up near 110 degrees Fahrenheit in eastern Washington, into the low hundreds, and then an ever so slight cool down here along the Snake River Valley, but still very warm through Saturday. And then finally Sunday, you see that finally that more stair step down, talking just triple digits, maybe that threshold just above that in the San Joaquin Valley of California. We brought the temperatures down along the lower Colorado River Valley from 116 to 120. Now we're talking maybe 105 to 109 degrees Fahrenheit on Sunday. And then if I go out into Monday and Tuesday, again, that more gradual kind of cooling or moderation of the air mass here across parts of the southwest, California, Nevada, etc. Certainly still warm. We're talking 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the Central Valley, 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the lower Colorado River Valley, talking 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the Snake River Valley in some locations in parts of eastern Washington and northern Oregon, but getting a little bit cooler all the while, high 80s in the Willamette Valley and the mid to low 80s in the SeaTac area. If we look at this kind of on an anomaly presentation, you can kind of see that cool down a little bit more. Obviously, this is the daytime temperature forecast from the GFS here for the anomalies, so looking at that color shade. And if we go out through Friday and into Saturday and finally Sunday, we're still warm in a lot of these areas, but you can see it cooling down a little bit from where we were earlier in the week, even getting cooler than average here in parts of Arizona. And taking this into early next week, again, can see that heat shifting north over Idaho, parts of Canada, and leaving the southwest, the west coast, just a little bit cooler here. Again, more seasonal, not necessarily cool or what we consider cold, but a little bit more appropriate for maybe mid-July. Another kind of function of, unfortunately, this persistent heat, as we've seen a lot of uptick in wildfire activity across California. I've been getting sent a lot of pictures of air tankers and other activity going on, smoke plumes and whatnot. And there are some of these fires which are rather bigger, particularly near Los Angeles and the Santa Barbara area. The lake fire here, pretty large, up near 30,000 acres, that increasingly contained here. Some of these other smaller fires which have gone up along the Sierra Nevada have fortunately been a little bit easier to contain, just I think with the winds a little bit lower, and some of that snowpack that we talked about earlier this year might be helping fire efforts there. Have seen some of these pop up in kind of concerning areas near Placerville and elsewhere, but not getting contained pretty quickly, all things considered. So I think that's good news for now. We have much more of the wildfire season to go through, I should say. But again, with this persistent heat, it's hard not to imagine that we're going to get some of these starts and have fires to talk about. I will say, sometimes you get a lot of this heat in here, you see these kind of bubbling fire activities, and then you'll finally get a trough, and sure, that brings temperatures down. But if it also brings the winds up, it's hard to call that maybe good news. So, it's kind of, sometimes wildfire forecasting can be counterintuitive. Sometimes you have this kind of hot, stale air. Sure, you're going to get fires, but it's really kind of tracking where the winds are going to come from and to see how they're going to get kicked up, and that really kind of prevents them from being contained. So it's kind of combining those two together, and it's kind of a Goldilocks problem in terms of finding where these wildfires are really going to get picked up to that kind of extreme activity. Another thing I wanted to touch on is, if you kind of look over the last 7 days as this heat wave has gained more traction across the west, we've seen kind of a calming down, or at least a moderation in the monsoon activity, which started pretty quickly at the end of June, and then looking like it was going to continue into early July. But we've seen kind of calming down, if you will. And if we look at precipitable water anomalies across the western U.S. here, just as of this morning, as you imagine, with a big ridge parked over the area, not seeing a lot of moisture getting into the Four Corners region or parts of Arizona. And as that heat moves toward the north with this forecast here from the ECMWF, that's usually a pretty good recipe for allowing some moisture return and flow to get back in and fuel that monsoon. So we'll see if that's the case here as we go through into this weekend and out into next week when we saw that heat shift north up into Canada, parts of the American Northwest. So now taking this forecast into Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday of next week. And with that heat pushing north, again, you can see that moisture return starting to get back into the Intermountain West. So potentially seeing an uptick in monsoon activity across the Four Corners region, some of the other areas here across Arizona, Nevada, and Utah as well. Probably can't even rule out parts of California here with some of the daytime shower and thunderstorm activity as we go through mid-July here. We'll have to keep an eye on that as we go into kind of the mid-July region. So potentially kind of a restart of the monsoon activity here. If you look at the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, you can see finally, while California is still on the warmer side of this graphic, a little bit less extreme, at least we can say here in the 8 to 14 days. So looking out into mid to late July at this point, with that heat shifting more over parts of Canada, and again, the northern U.S. Rockies, parts of the Golden Triangle, Montana, the eastern Snake River Valley, getting a little bit east of the Divide as well. If we jump over and look at the precipitation departures from normal along that same time period, you can see, again, potentially a return to more typical or slightly above average monsoon activity with that heat and that ridge shifting north like we looked at earlier. So I finish up here, I want to touch on one more kind of long-range conversational piece here. We have been watching La Nina attempt, that's the word I'll use, attempt to develop this summer. That hasn't been going maybe as smoothly as we thought. La Nina struggling to kind of gain traction as we've gone through the summer here. We typically see some of that development a little bit later in fall, so it's too early to say, kind of ring the false alarm button as of yet. But the latest forecast here that has just come out from the ECMWF for July, all these different ensemble plumes here show some of these members, the majority I would say, dropping below 0 degrees Celsius, but typically looking for that 0.5. So negative 0.5 degrees Celsius and below to get into a La Nina proper. And a decreasing number of these members are showing that sort of activity going into the winter. In fact, now the majority are staying within this kind of neutral threshold here. If you can kind of count how many of these dots or forecasts here are inside that threshold, that's certainly the majority, maybe even 70 to 80% of them. So chances are increasing for an INSO neutral fall and winter, maybe versus a La Nina. A little bit too early to say that definitively, but that has been a trend that we've noted really kind of starting at the end of spring there and then going through summer. Just hasn't been as rapidly developing of a La Nina that we thought, and that could have some big implications for the western U.S., perhaps bringing up the uncertainty as to the precipitation pattern and geographic behavior that we'll see going into this winter, perhaps increasing the importance of where we're at in terms of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which has also not been quite as negative here as La Nina has struggled to develop. So a few different things we'll have to keep an eye on. I don't, again, too early to say, what the implications are for the exact kind of water year behavior, but at the very least would decrease kind of your textbook La Nina pattern, which tends to favor the Pacific Northwest, perhaps even the Northwest U.S. Rockies with precipitation versus some of the southern states like California, Nevada, or Arizona. So maybe seeing this conversation shift a little bit. You can actually see this if we just look over at the Pacific sea surface temperatures here, where we typically are looking for La Nina to develop. It's in this region here. And while we see that signature, these kind of cooler eddies pushing west into the central Pacific here, getting all the way over here right into the middle, we're seeing that activity shift west. It's just not at a very cold magnitude. You can look down at this color bar here. I mean, there has been La Ninas that have developed much more strongly at this time in the year and just not quite seeing that same signature. Still seeing some warmth here floating around the central Pacific and not in a La Nina yet, and no obvious signs that we're going to get there anytime soon. And even if you look up into the eastern and northeastern Pacific, kind of what we look for with the negative PDO signature, cooler water in this area here, and then the negative PMM here, seeing kind of that cold water signature, but again, not at a strong magnitude here. And it's actually I would maybe even say likely, that this warm water that has pushed in closer to the British Columbia coast and the Washington coast, the lack of cool water here has maybe allowed some of the heat to build in to the west here, the west proper, in terms of some of the heat wave activity that we've seen just over the last week here. So continuing to watch these two kind of areas unfold and to see what kind of winter we might be looking at. Again, you're talking about a 6-month forecast here, July out to through the middle of the water year and kind of the peak of activity. So too early to say anything definitively, but we're definitely seeing that story shift here a little bit as we've gone through summer. That's all I have for you all here today. Have a good Wednesday, and I'll talk to you all soon.